I would like to ask my survivalist prepper friends a question. Many of you have taken issue with my assertion that the center part of this country, the Midwest, will be the most dangerous place to be during shit hits the fan. Well, the Attorney General came out and made a statement recently that confirms what I've said. But my question to you is this. How many of your plans, your preps, have to do with a polar vortex hitting? I want you to consider for a minute, what if the day before this weather event arrived, someone had decided to pop off an EMP, and there were no fans running in heaters anywhere. There was no electrical heat of any kind, and people had to go without during -20, -15, wind chills of -50. What would have happened after 3 days, 4 days in northern Indiana, in southern Minnesota, in western Iowa? What would have happened? Would you have been able to, with your preps, been able to deal with this with absolutely no heat? Now, the statement from the Attorney General that I spoke of is this. This is a quote. "It is unacceptable, illegal, and inhumane to detain people without basic amenities, access to counsel, or medical care. The reported conditions at the Metropolitan Detention Center," and this is in Brooklyn, "are appalling. Prisoners and detainees have rights, and those rights must be enforced." Now, this is during simply a weather event with the power on, generally speaking, and society functioning normally. They're talking about it being illegal to hold the prisoners because it's so cold in areas that apparently are having some kind of a hiccup with the heating systems. You see, I've kind of revised my map a little bit. During a real shit hits the fan scenario, if it would happen during the winter, these are the places where you would be in mortal danger. Because if they are saying now that it is illegal and unacceptable to hold prisoners for a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week during this polar vortex, what do you think is going to happen if they have a month, 6 weeks during the winter? I guarantee you they will let the people go. They'll put them in homeless shelters. They won't hold them. They absolutely will not, because they're already, the Attorney General of New York is saying it's illegal. So I think it's pretty clear where the safest areas to be during shit hits the fan are. Someplace with a remotely survivable moderate climate. And Illinois ain't it. Missouri ain't it. You will run out of firewood. And let's say that you do have firewood, or you do have some way to generate heat. But you still don't have any internet. You don't have any way to communicate with telephones. And there are random groups of people released from prison. You're not going to be able to discern them from normal people. And they will be randomly trying to find whatever they can find to survive. Places like Florida, southern Georgia, Texas, Louisiana might have the same problems, but no one is going to die if they sleep outside for one night or you go without power. It's been, for Florida, and I live in northern Florida, it's been pretty chilly. It's been uncomfortably cold for people that are used to living in Florida weather. I'm not even remotely trying to say it's nearly as uncomfortable as Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. But in those areas, when you have every 6 months you have to deal with this, you have preparation, you have plan. Down here, most of the construction isn't designed to deal with cold weather. for a long period of time. And without power, they're already talking about record amounts of natural gas being used. They're even asking people during this polar vortex to turn down their heat because they can't handle the demand. What would happen? Ask yourself this question. What would happen if there had been no power during this time in the Midwest? How many people would have died? If there had been a situation where plowing the roads wasn't number one on the priority of things to get done, you don't survive for very long. And that's why having unsupported fire bases out in the middle of nowhere on top of grocery stores is not a good idea. And I'll show you this again. Here's an article. Actually, this is the Twitter account from Attorney General James. Quote, "It is unacceptable, illegal, and inhumane to detain people without basic amenities, access to counsel, or medical care." That's fact, and that's fact in all 50 states. That's why I did this map originally. Because a lot of the movies, a lot of the crap online about shit hits the fan they're all set during temperate times and in temperate areas. You never see this where, other than maybe Red Dawn, where there's any kind of weather hiccups to deal with. And this polar vortex is more than a weather hiccup. It's deadly. It's killing people now. Imagine what would that be like if you're a prepper, if you're a survivalist, and you think that weapons are the answer to everything. They really ain't. You don't get very good sight pictures when your eyelashes are frozen together. And it would be something that I don't think a lot of people, especially out in the Midwest, have planned for. You can only burn so much firewood. And when it's this cold, you've got to burn a lot of it. And if you had 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I don't know that anybody could have that much firewood. I'm not saying a polar vortex would last that long, but you would need an immense amount, and it would be something where if there were these releases, and I guarantee they will, because they don't want to be responsible for the deaths. If they release a prisoner and he goes on his own way and then he dies, 48 hours later, 2 miles down the road, that's not the fault of the state. It's no longer their responsibility. They gave him his walking papers. And we know that that's how the state operates. They always want to be innocent and blameless of all of the damage that they do. And with 2.3 million prisoners detained, if something like this would happen during the winter, during a situation like what we see now in the north, it would be, they talk about Venezuela's humanitarian disaster. We'd have one on our own up here that would be orders of magnitude worse without power. Because imagine what it would be like to try to fix the problem during this kind of weather. How do you go about repairing the damage from an EMP blast when it's minus 15 or minus 20 out? They're having to set the train tracks on fire to keep them from cracking. It's just insane, the type of cold here. It's something I don't think a lot of people think about, how slaved the Midwest, especially the northern part of the Midwest, is to the system, to the grid, so to speak. We have a lot of homeless down here in the South, and they do perfectly fine most of the year round on their own because it's fairly temperate. The biggest thing they usually have a problem with is the heat in the summer. That's the biggest problem. And worst case scenario, they can just go jump in the ocean. It's not the best solution, but it's a solution. There's really no solution at all for this but to sit there and freeze and die. So that's why I think that this map here might be quite a bit more accurate, being near the coasts. And I know everybody talks about tidal waves, and we've had polar vortexes a lot more often in this country than we have had tidal waves that have killed people. Everybody talks about Florida being underwater. It's not going to happen. It was a ridiculous map, the Navy map that everybody took seriously. that amount of water melting would cause all sorts of, that amount of ice turning into water due to melt would cause all sorts of other problems as well. But I just wanted to cover this and do another map because I think it's very important, because we're getting to a point now in this country where a lot of operators in the world are sick of our shit. And this issue in Venezuela could lead to something like this. There's a lot of bad actors out there that would take out their frustration and anger with Washington, D.C. on the rest of this country. And that would be unfortunate. But I will leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.